Hi everyone, my name is Kirsten, and today I'm presenting for myself, Alex, and Jessica. So we looked at web-based interventions. For the presentation today, we'll start with a definition of web-based interventions. We'll then go into a summary of our primary research article, and we'll look at the study rationale, the methods, the analysis and results, the conclusion, and a discussion of the strengths and weaknesses of the study. And then finally, we'll talk about the big picture and suggested applications of web-based interventions. So what is a web-based intervention? In its most basic form, web-based interventions are a type of intervention that utilizes online tools to create behavior change. A more formal definition was put forth by Barak et al. As a primarily self-guided intervention program that is executed by means of a prescriptive online program operated through a website and used by consumers seeking health and mental health related assistance. The intervention program itself attempts to create positive change and/or improve and enhance knowledge, awareness, and understanding via the provision of sound health-related material and use of interactive web-based components. So let's get to the basics of this intervention by dissecting the previous definition. Web-based interventions can take the form of a multitude of things based in the virtual world. At the end of the day, though, these interventions aim to educate or to change behavior, or both. To this end, interventions are based on behavioral theories. Materials used are supposed to be based on best practices and known scientific evidence. For example, our primary article used social cognitive theory for their intervention, while our secondary article used self-regulatory theory. Using your desired intervention in theory, you can target your audience and decide what methods or tools would be best used to reach them. For web-based interventions, tools are key. This is where you can take education or counseling methods that could be done in person and use technology to deliver them. So tools can be anything like emails, questionnaires, websites, text alerts, videos, or graphics. Studies have shown that mixed media or multimedia formats are preferred in intended audiences. So using something like a video and an interactive quiz might be better than just a text and a regular quiz. Here's an example of an intervention website. Notice the phrases at the top, which look similar to stages of change. So it says phase 1, it's up to you, phase 2, making the change, and phase 3, keeping on track. So where we start to get into the innovative and interesting parts of this technique are with tailoring and feedback. So a website can be fully automated where there's no human interaction, or one where there is. That can be something like a support chat room or some interaction with a clinician. Most websites that are built have algorithms to adapt to changes in the consumers. For instance, the intervention can be highly tailored, meaning the content can change with stages of readiness, relapse, or outcomes of assessment. Same with feedback. When performing a desired task, you may get affirmative and congratulatory feedback, or if you're not meeting desired outcomes, you may get feedback on how to achieve desired outcomes and steps to increase compliance. So here we can see an example of how different stages could go through the intervention. All these could be programmed and carried out through algorithms back and forth as needed. So here we see examples of feedback that might occur in an intervention as you proceed through a quiz or as desired behaviors change or don't change. So there's different icons, and you can see how the answers are tailored based on the responses given by the participant. So now we're going to get into the summary of the research article. So the article we looked at focused on dairy consumption in young adults. So the studies have shown that dairy consumption declines substantially during young adulthood. And the purpose of this particular study was to evaluate the effects of a web-based nutrition education intervention grounded in social cognitive theory on outcome expectations, self-efficacy, self-regulation, and intake of dairy products in college students. So there was a 5-week intervention conducted using an online course system. Participation in this study was one of 3 research options available for course credit for students, enrolled in 2 sections of an undergraduate personal health course. Participants received credit for engaging in the study if they completed data collection, and participation in the intervention was not required. There were a total of 294 participants, and participants were randomly assigned to the intervention group or the comparison group, which received no intervention. During the 5-week intervention, participants reviewed one nutrition intervention topic online each week. The educational information and materials were taken from the USDA, the FDA, and the NDC, and peer-reviewed journal articles. Intervention topics included importance of dairy and low-fat dairy intake during young adulthood, for example, calcium and bone health. So the information was sent to participants every day for the first 3 weeks, tapering to just once each week for the final 2 weeks of the intervention based on feedback from participants. Basically, they were saying they were getting too many emails. So during the intervention, participants were encouraged to complete daily behavior checklists to address self-regulation. And if they did complete these behavior checklists, which were in their emails, they were put into a drawing for a $20 gift card. So that was kind of the incentive there to do that extra activity. And 7-day food records and social cognitive theory questionnaires were collected at 2 time points throughout the intervention, once at baseline and then once at the end point of the study. So social cognitive theory variables were measured using the Food Beliefs Survey, and outcome expectations of this study, self-efficacy, self-regulation, and social support were evaluated using scale systems. So there were 5-point Likert scales and a 100-point analog scale. SPSS was used to analyze the data. Intervention effects on change in social cognitive theory and on change in behavioral variables were analyzed separately with multivariate analysis of covariance with age and sex covariates. So, the results. There was a very low attrition rate, so 92% of participants did complete this study, which is great. There were no significant differences at baseline between intervention and comparison groups for sex, age, total dairy intake, low-fat dairy intake, or any of the social cognitive theory variables. So both the groups were pretty similar. Basically, overall, students consumed well below the recommended levels of dairy foods as to be expected. And they felt that increasing consumption would be good for them, but believed that changes would be difficult. Students perceived their family members and friends as being fairly neutral in their support of dairy consumption. And intervention participants reported greater gains in self-efficacy for dairy foods, but not self-efficacy for low-fat dairy foods. So the intervention did not alter positive or negative outcome expectations related to consuming the recommended amount of dairy products. A possible explanation for this is that young adults tend to believe that they're at low risk for developing health-related problems, specifically associated with nutrition and dairy intake. There was no substantial change in total or low-fat dairy intake for either the intervention or comparison group. Therefore, a longer intervention may be needed. Again, this was only a 5-week intervention, but maybe if it was, 6 months or something much longer, it could have produced better changes in behavior. And then strengthening content to include social support and further target efficacy, self-regulation, and outcome expectations may be necessary to achieve behavior change related to dairy intake. So the limitations of the study, again, were that it was pretty short in duration, only 5 weeks. It didn't target that social support, which is an important determinant of behavior change. And the sample population may have been more interested in health than the typical college population, as they were enrolled in a personal health course. The strengths of the study include that it did use a validated questionnaire to measure social cognitive theory variables. It used 7-day food records for measuring dairy intake, and again, there was that low attrition rate. So now let's talk about the big picture and some of the suggested applications for web-based interventions. So web-based interventions can be utilized for pretty much any intervention that doesn't absolutely require human interaction. This style does have some advantages and weaknesses. So the advantages include that it can reach a large audience. It's a lower cost in the long run due to the digital format than some other interventions might be. Additionally, tools can be used for assessment, education, self-monitoring, evaluation, and adjustment. And it focuses in tandem with tools on individual level modification, so things like attitudes, knowledge, self-efficacy. And finally, it can be tailored to fit individual needs at each step. Some of the disadvantages of web-based interventions include that it's only available to those with internet access. There is a high short-term cost, and this is due to the money it takes to develop and create the web application. And the more intensive the design, the more money it'll cost. Additionally, the intervention is only as good as the clinician or the developer of the program. So the clinician or person building the intervention has to know what they're looking for and how to effectively achieve that in the digital realm. And finally, many times web-based interventions don't extend out to environmental factors, such as availability of behavior change, such as fruit and vegetables or areas near where they live for exercise. They also may not attempt to change the home environment of the consumer. So what does all this mean in application? Well, web-based interventions can induce some changes, and we saw this in our study. However, increased personal level cognitive change does not equal increased desired outcomes. So in that same study, it was shown that while self-efficacy and self-regulation increased, the subject's outcome expectation did not change. Positive outcome expectation can lead to maintained, continued desired behavior modification. Springville et al. Theorized that these approaches lacked a focus on goal setting and action planning. Perhaps expanding web-based interventions reach to include environmental factors such as social support and changes to the home environment might lead to better and longer lasting effects. Even the researchers from our primary study indicated that increased social support might have been beneficial. However, Springville et al.'s study showed that while some in their study had improved behavior, extra attention, information, and goal setting did not significantly increase efficacy. It was also more challenging to meet the needs of the consumer in a meaningful way, as goal setting needs very specific guidance and modification, which cannot always be done effectively in a web-based intervention. Thanks for listening to our presentation.